welcome to the first lecture. First lecture OPM600 on my mission, a historic moment, and I appreciate all the patience of everyone who took time right up until the last check was done about 15 minutes ago that says everybody has connectivity. Your connectivity varies from video to some people. Not everyone has video capability, which is fine. Everyone has vocal capabilities, but some of the microphones weren't working. So the good news for each of you is that my connectivity to you is working, which says that you can hear, you can see, and you can see the PowerPoint slides and the Excel spreadsheets that I will put on the screen for you. What I'm going to ask you to do, and I see you already done, maybe I've done it here, maybe you have, but I see everybody has got their microphone on mute. That's good if you can do that, because what that does, if everyone's on mute, it will stop any background noise interfering. It seems that everybody is good with that. If for some reason you can't hear or see me and you're in the class now, either click on your microphone and tell me that, or send me a text, which is your text box is down in the bottom left hand corner. Okay. So a couple of things that we can do. First of all, I thought I would brighten up your day if I can by showing you. I think if you can see, this is my Invercairn beach. So this is from my upper balcony up in the back of my yard, or my upper deck. So this picture overlooks Lake Huron, and it's about 15 degrees this morning, a little bit chilly, but it's nice and sunny, and that's where I am today, just so you know, and so you can have some jealousy that says where you are. So everyone seen that? Okay, if not, tell me that. Okay, and what I'm going to do is cover that. So first thing we're going to cover, and everyone may know already, but you should be seeing the Excel spreadsheet on your screen, and you'll notice that the 26th is read out as red, because that's the day that we go to Amazon, and that lecture will be scheduled for the Tuesday at 9 AM, and there's a second session, or a repeat session, which will be Saturday at 9. That session won't be required if this is successful in our recording. I will just post the recording, so the second session will disappear. But essentially, anyone that can make the Tuesday session should plan to be in there. And again, it looks like I can record, and if I can record, then at least the visual image of the lecture will be out there for you also. So keep that in mind. That will be an online, next Tuesday will be an online lecture, and I will send a separate invitation for that. Okay, it's not sent yet because I didn't want to confuse people, but that will happen then. Okay. Secondly, as we start to look at the lecture for in fact, let me come back again just to confirm. We've now got 18 participants. So is it anyone who's online now who cannot hear and see what's happening? You can just send me a text so I can see that. If you can't, I'm assuming everyone can, and we'll go from there. All right. Can someone just unmute your mic and tell me?
It seems like your video is lagging, possibly.
Well, that's I'm not surprised, Saman, because with 18 people on it, remember I may have some broadband issues. What's
Okay.
most important is the voice is coming across. And I think Izzy just confirmed for me that the voice is good. So forget about the delay in the video, because most of the time it's going to be on the PowerPoint slides. The one thing that you can do to probably help that broadband width, and again, someone like Izzy who's very skilled in the videoing for Skype and for YouTube, I think if you click your video button and cut your video off, your video back to me, because there's too many faces on the screen anyway, But if you click your video button off, I think that'll lessen the burden on my my broadband. I'm thinking. Okay.
Okay, I'll try.
You can try that. Okay. But the voice is good, and if everybody's good with that, then we're going to go with the lecture and get things started. Okay. Second thing is I haven't sent you a chapter 1 quiz yet. I'll try and do that, but I'll try and do that to you before the weekend, and if not, then we'll just escape it. It's not much there. The discussion board, I've got three quarters of it marked, maybe 75-80% marked. I will post this for you within a day. It is a very good discussion board, very good. There's some good exchanges, there is some good research that's been done. I appreciate the efforts you've made. It's probably one of the better starts to the process. So I appreciate that, and I think everybody participated. And if not, then it's there, hard luck. But I will mark it and I will post the marks for you pretty quickly. Okay, all right. That said and that done, let's go back and let's hit the slide. So the first we're going to talk about is the purchasing process. And this is a very simple. It's a simple process that if you follow the steps, and there's not many steps in it, you'll find that it is good. Okay. When we talk today, we're going to talk about purchasing objectives. You should be looking at slide 2. Purchasing objectives, we're going to talk about the responsibilities of purchasing. Now remember, purchasing and supply chain are interchangeable terms. Okay, it depends on how prestigious you want your title to be, because I'm Jim Phillips, the Vice President of Supply Chain Management. Sounds a lot better maybe than I'm Jim Phillips, the purchasing clerk. So depending on what your preference is, purchasing and, in my case, in your case, supply chain management are interchangeable. Sometimes the word procurement will also be added in there. So those are all synonymous terms and they mean the same thing. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about e-procurement a little bit today, but one of the important concepts is going to be procure to pay. And that's concept we'll deal with a little bit length, because it's important that we pay our suppliers, or why would they send you product. Okay. We'll probably there's about 60 slides in this bank, 65 slides. We won't go through them all today because we have 2 weeks on each 2 weeks on each chapter to cover. So we're going to cover whatever we can through to about noon, whatever we can do. Okay, and we'll talk about types of purchases and how to improve that purchasing process later. Okay. When you're looking at, the next slide talks about the world-class purchasing staff must continually work to improve efficiency and effectiveness of what we call the purchasing process. World-class is a very significant term, and I don't know how, only someone whose ability to evaluate your purchasing process versus Apple's purchasing process versus Algoma's purchasing process or Honda's purchasing process could tell you whether or not you are a world-class purchasing organization. I think the term world-class is one of those target comments is out there. Everybody wants to be world-class. I want to have a world-class manufacturing company. I want to have a world-class service company. I want to have a world-class banking system. It just means striving to be the best that you can be. Okay, and as we talk about that is part of your job. Maybe not initially when you go into purchasing, because you'll be learning a job, you'll be a junior buyer, you'll be a buyer, you'll be a senior buyer. But as you step up to that senior buyer role or into the assistant manager role, the manager role, the effectiveness and the efficiency of your process then becomes part of your concern, part of your domain, because I want the process to be efficient, which means it's quick and we can get purchase orders out and orders placed and quotes done in a very timely manner, and it doesn't take us days and days and days to do that. So that's it. That's why when we say efficiency is the speed of what your process is. The effectiveness is a different word because sometimes people confuse those two words. Effectiveness means how well does it work? Does your supplier get the right information on a timely basis? Do we pay their invoices on a timely basis? Do they send the quotes in a timely basis? Are they working with us to get our continuous improvement activities fixed? That's the word effectiveness. Okay, so we'll come to that. But when you look at the next 6 bullet points, we don't have to go through them because they will come up in 2 slides from now, and we'll talk in detail. But essentially, we want to know and how you identify that is what's the key elements in your process, you know, and when you look at the next, identifying the needs and evaluating, identifying, ensuring, etc. Those are all part of the process, and we'll go into them in detail. But we want to make sure that the key elements of your process is effective and working well. And if it's not, we can improve it. There's a dollar value that's thrown out there is about $140 per PO. For every PO that you cut or you send out, it probably takes about $140 of effort to do that. So if you're buying an item for $10 and your company policy insists that you issue a PO for everything, then you're going to issue a $140 value PO of your time, your organization's time, for something that costs $10. It's kind of silly, and that's where in a lot of cases we'll use credit cards or procurement cards, or we just ask the supplier sometimes to don't send an invoice in for $10, $20, $100. Build it up and send in an invoice for 2 or 3 POs at the same time. So we'll try to help the supplier become more efficient as well, because ultimately their inefficiency is in their overheads. Their overhead costs are in the purchase price, and therefore you're paying for it one way or the other, just you don't quite see it. All right, but we want to try and improve that effectiveness. The definition from the textbook on slide 4 says, until an organization can streamline its day-to-day purchasing process, it will continue to delay implementing other important strategic activities. Absolutely. If you can't do the basic job, how can you do the big job? How can you do the thinking job? If you can't get the purchase orders out, you can't get your quotes done on time and timely basis, you really can't get to the bigger job of continuous improvement or cost reductions. So a lot of organizations are still in that mode of just getting POs out, and that comes back to some of your comments on traditional purchasing. That's what it is. Sometimes it's just PO generation, etc., etc. Okay, so let's go on to what we're calling in slide 5 your purchasing objectives. Every organization has to have an objective. You have to know what you're working for or what you're trying to attain. At Honda, is very clearly our objective was always number one. Our primary objective in the whole corporation globally was to beat Toyota. We put that in our business plan. It says first goal is to beat Toyota in every aspect that we can, because they are recognized as the greatest company out there, and we want to strive to be the best, even though Toyota is a better company than we were. So, but the point is, you need that target. Inside a company, every department, every organization inside a department has to have objectives also. Okay, and those objectives have to add up to the company's objectives. So part of our objectives would be supply continuity or continuity of supply. If you're providing parts to an assembly plant such as Honda or General Motors or Ford, or to Apple for that matter, Apple's looking for the continuity of supply that says you will continually supply the products that as required at the time they're required, at the right quality and the right time, etc. We call those the 5 R's. We'll come to that. But it's important that we have supply continuity. That is our job. If we break that continuity, the person who's receiving your parts or who will use those parts that you've just purchased will be down. They will stop production unless you're holding a lot of inventory, and we're trying to minimize that inventory. Okay, we should try to minimize it. So that's important as one of your objectives. The first objective should always be continuity of supply. You want to make sure we try and manage the process efficiently, effectively. We've said that. Third thing, you want to try and make sure we can develop the supply-based management. So that's not developing the supplier, that's developing your skill as to how do you manage that supply base. At Honda, we have 900 suppliers, total 900 suppliers globally. General Motors has 64,000 suppliers. It doesn't take a deep thinking person to recognize that it's easier to manage 900 suppliers than it is 64,000 suppliers, which means their purchasing department must be overtaxed. They must be having a lot of purchasing people. If you're going to manage a supply base, you've got to have a manageable number. So there's reasons for that. Okay. So the first objective is, it says I should repeat slides, so let's just bypass that and go down. Okay. when you look at the other objective is you want to develop strong relationships, and several of you mentioned in contemporary purchasing exercise on the discussion board that relationship is a very important. In this case, it's saying you want a strong relationship with the functional stakeholders. The functional stakeholders, so you know, as internal in my organization, as a purchasing organization, we are supplying an internal customer, whether that be manufacturing, whether it be the quality group, whether it be the design engineers, whether it be the prototyping of parts. We are servicing an internal stakeholder, and a stakeholder is someone who has got to buy into your process and sees the benefit or the pain of your process. But we want to build a strong relationship and to take away the existing silos that's inside a company. Accounting is a primary silo, quality is, sales and marketing is. They're all silos that have their own department, their own function, their own interaction. But when we can bridge that gap, when we can bridge the gap of connecting the silos together, then we become a very effective and efficient operation. Okay. You want to support your organizational goals and objectives. The reason you have to do that is if you're not meeting what your company president wants to do, then you're failing as a company. And you and I will be held accountable, at the quarterly reviews or the mid-month, mid-year, or the end of the year when you think the president says we want to make a 15% profit, and we made a 5% profit. Obviously, we would have failed in that objective. But in purchasing, we have to meet the company's objectives and make their objectives ours, so that the purchasing objectives will meet theirs. Okay, very important to do that. It's the same with integrating strategies that I, as a director, will create. We want to create the strategies again that supports the organization. If you can't do that, then quite honestly, you will fail, and you probably won't have a job. Okay. Is there any questions so far? If somebody's got a question, by all means, just unmute your mic and ask me, or if you're good to go, I'll continue on. Okay. At that point, I'll come back to your slides. The elements, the key elements of the purchasing process is very simple. Is you need to identify the user's requirements. Okay, and when we say identify the user's requirements, is the user's going to come to you, the engineer's going to come to you and say, Mr. Purchasing, Miss Purchasing, I would like you to buy me a TV. I'd like a large flat screen TV. So I know that they want a TV, I know it's flat screen, and I know it's large, but I don't know anything else. And so when we want to identify the user's requirements, this is where the interface and the benefit of purchasing comes from, because we are going to ask that engineer is to tell me more about what you want, tell me what you're going to use it for, and you don't have to. Like, this is not I'm your boss, so tell me. It's if you help me understand what you're going to use it for, I'll understand, and then you can also give me more details. For example, on my vessels at Algoma, we have a common room, a mess room they call it, where people can relax and have coffees and blah blah chit chat and whatnot. And there's always a TV in there. Some vessels have large common rooms, therefore you can put a 60-inch TV in there. But other ones are very small, a couch and a couple of chairs, that if you put a 60-inch TV into that room, it would be overpowering and it wouldn't be effective. So you would try to find out what size of TV, what's it going to be used for, how much are you looking to spend, because I can buy you a $10,000 TV, or I can buy you a $400 TV. So again, when we try to identify the user requirements, we ask those questions so we can get what they're looking for, because it becomes a pain in your ass, quite honestly, when you don't ask the questions. I go out and get a TV, bring it in, and the receiving department says, this is not what I wanted, send it back. Now you've got to go through the whole process of shipping stuff back, getting credits for it, making sure there's no damage done to it. So it's better to identify it up front. So again, don't be afraid as people start to ask about even photocopy paper. Can you buy me some photocopy paper? Of course you can. What weight do you want? What is it for? Is it for putting out, the president's message to the shareholders, and it should be better quality maybe than the regular cheap regular photocopy paper. So it's important that we identify that need. Okay, we talked about evaluating the need effectively and efficiently. We'll come back to that. We also have to be able to identify suppliers based on what the requester, and that's the person who's making the request to purchase that TV. Depending on what the requester is, I should identify the suppliers who can provide that for me. And ideally, you should always go to your existing supply base. If you go and search for new suppliers for everything you buy, you're going to spend a huge amount of time, significant amount of time, looking for something you already have. So we want to say, this is my supply base, this is who do business with me. Inside that supply base of, in Algoma's case, of 500 suppliers, is who can service this need, in this particular case the TV. So you need to identify the suppliers, and if you already haven't got them as what we would call a preferred supplier, where I'm going to go to one or two suppliers, my strategy should tell me what one to use, but essentially when I say that, if I've got two suppliers who can supply the TV, and my strategy is to give supplier A 70% of the volume and supplier B 30% of my volume, then what I should always check is, where am I on that strategy? And if I'm giving, so far this year I've given supplier A 80% of my business and the supplier B only 20% of my business, I am not following my strategy. I'm overloading one supplier, I'm giving them more money, so I should actually try and correct that. So even though supplier B might be a little bit more expensive or for some other reason, I should start to build him back up to what my strategy was, which was 30%. Because it's human nature to become comfortable with your supplier. And I like supplier A better than I like supplier B. I do more business with them, so I'm just comfortable with them. It's easy to pick up the phone and say, Spencer, send me over another TV, will you? Whereas opposed to, I've given Spencer too much business this point, I need to start to pare that back and meet my strategy. Fourth point is, ensure that payment occurs promptly. Most companies pay on an average of 60 days. The terms are net 30, which says when I get your invoice, I will pay that invoice within 30 days. That's the standard. That is on almost every purchase order. But most companies don't apply to it. And their feeling is, and my accountant's feeling is that if I delay payment, the money stays longer in my bank and I make more interest on it. That's their priority. In today's age, when interest is 2%, 3%, you're really not making a hell of a lot of money in interest anyway. But their idea of saving money for the company based on delaying payments is actually hurting you as a purchaser, because your smaller supplier out there has already bought material, he's already applied the labor, he's already assembled the parts, and he's already shipped them to you. He's already out the money. He's already had to pay the money out. His cost has been adding up, and now you owe him $1,000, and your accountant says, I'd like to pay him in 60 days. That's a battle you have to fight as a purchasing person. You have to go to accounting and say, no, the terms are net 30, you need to pay on terms net 30, or I will change my terms to the supplier and let them know it's net 60. If it's net 60, your supplier most likely is going to put an increase on your price, because he wants to be paid for his interest that he's not getting, or his extra costs that he's not getting on a timely basis. So make sure that when we say the payment occurs promptly, if it's due to be paid on Wednesday, make sure it gets paid on Wednesday, and if it doesn't, you should be fighting the supplier's battle to get that done. Supplier will tell you, and he'll call purchasing right away and say, Jim, I see my invoices are 100 days past due, and that sometimes happens. Can you check into what's the problem? He'll give you the invoice number, and I'll go checking it. And even as the director of purchasing, I will check it personally, because my young junior buyer may not think it's that important to pay the bill. My junior accountant, who's making the processing the invoices, may not think it's important. But I, as a director of purchasing, know it is very important, because if you're not feeding back into your supply base, if you're not paying their bills, you're creating a financial hardship to them, which ultimately may put them out of business. Okay, so that has to happen. when the goods arrive at your facility, you want to make sure when you deliver them to the person who's ordered it or the department who's ordered them, you want to make sure they are what they ask for and that they effectively meet the need. And again, come back to the TV. If I can't get that 60-inch TV he's asking for, but I gave him a 50-inch or a 43-inch or whatever it might be, say to them why I can't meet your requirements. Is this sufficient? Is it working all right? And can we do that? And of course, it's the feedback that says actually the supplier was very good, the product's very good, I think you should use them again. But did you meet the need effectively? And saying is, did you deliver what was asked in the format that was asked for, and is it working fine? And the bottom line should always be driving continuous improvement. Now, I've heard 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times people saying you can't drive continuous improvement. After a while, everything is perfect and you can't improve it. And that's just an incorrect answer. Everything that you do can be tweaked, can be made better, etc., etc. It can be made less costly. So at Honda, we ask for a cost reduction, a continuous improvement target of 3% per year. You know, on average, 2% per year on average. If the supplier gives me the parts for 10 years, it's theoretically at 3% per year. 10 years later, that my parts would cost 30% less than what it did when I bought them the first time. It really doesn't work that way. But you're trying to set a target that says you want to drive a continuous improvement mentality of 2 to 3% per year. So you have to look for ideas how to do that. So to drive continuous improvement is the same as cost improvement, but you also can improve your process. You know, the quote didn't come in on a timely basis, therefore you can improve the process by speaking to that supplier, understanding why he can't quote on a quicker basis, and how do we fix that. And that's continuous improvement. Okay. The next chart that you're going to see is a very complicated chart, but it's not. It's called the purchasing process, and essentially it's what is truly a good flow chart, because of you can see the screen where you can see the triangles. Triangles are decision points, or the comments that say, you know, the first triangle. So again, you look at the user's needs, specification, statement of work. You know, is a new product requirement? Do you need to? Is it a customer order? Does it exist? You know, does it require a requisition, etc., etc. There's some things you can do up front, and then you come to you, and the question you should ask is, do I have an approved supplier? I want this to go to Walmart. Is Walmart a approved supplier? And that's a simple thing. I come back to my TV example. Walmart's got a special on this week where they're selling 60-inch TVs for half price. If I go to my normal place, Best Buy, and that TV is $1,000, but Walmart's selling the same TV or similar TV for $500, but Walmart's not a approved supplier, I really can't go to Walmart. So you have to ask those questions. And I don't want you to go through this process chart in detail at this point. You should be able to follow along and say there's some decisions made, and most decision blocks should have a yes/no component. You know, so is it an approved supplier? No. Then you drop down and say, is the amount small? Yes or no? Yes, it is a small amount. Just release it. Do it. If it's not, if it's complex, then you have to go through the RFQ process. So the yes and no blocks are always triangular for the simple reason that a decision has to be made. And if you make the decision, yes or no, then you follow that path. And at the end of the day, it all goes back to payment of the supplier, but it's just a different way of doing that, or a more detailed way. So I want you to be able to read a flow chart. And people say, yes, you took that in OPM600, or yes, Mary's teaching you that in OPM, 610. It's important to read a flow chart, because if you follow the flow chart, even a poor performing employee can do a decent job. Okay. And by the way, this same process flow chart that you have with decision blocks, etc., your internal auditors will use that if you're an ISO company, an ISO company, or if you're a certified supplier. They're going to make sure that you do tell me what you do, show me what you do, and you actually do what you're supposed to do. And if you don't do this, then that's when you start to find there's errors. Okay, so again, understand your.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
So every time like you have the purchasing, so you have to update the scorecard for the supplier.
Yep.
and then evaluate them every single time?
No, usually, and it's a good question, because normally when you're evaluating a supplier, it's usually either a monthly or quarterly basis. So I wouldn't update the scorecard for the supplier on every transaction, but I would update the scorecard on the supplier based on the last month's work. How many lates did I get? How many missed deliveries did I get? How many deliveries did I get? You're looking for 99% accuracy. If you get 99% accuracy, then Annie, the thing that you've got there is that you make a note, because you try to, you keep a record of what they are, and you go back and you reevaluate that supplier 1 month or 2 months or 3 months from now. Many suppliers are only evaluated once a year, and that's good. That's okay, because if you've got a problem today, you tend to deal with it and you fix it. And if you actually fix the problem properly, it won't occur again. But so yes, we will do it at a scorecard in some cases. We will do it quarterly, but not, and that's more than enough to do it monthly. Honda does ours monthly, but you cannot do it daily. You cannot do it transaction by transaction. You've got to accumulate it and say this is where they are, and then you would rate the supplier honestly. Does that answer your question, Annie? Annie?
Yeah, I get it already.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So
it means that when you evaluate the supplier,
well, yes.
so you need to
first
choose
of all,
among
I
the supplier,
evaluate the
and then
supplier.
you have negotiate with them.
Right, but I evaluate the supplier first when I select them. When I decide I want to use Best Buy as my electronic supplier, I evaluate the capabilities and the etc. etc. And once I determine that's the supplier of choice, I will use them. And to use their competitor would be the Source, possibly. Let's say the Source or Walmart. You would evaluate those suppliers against each other and make the good determination up front. At the last lecture, I indicated if you do the job of selecting your suppliers properly, you'll have much less headaches with them going forward. And then part of that selection process will be, what is your on-time delivery now with your current suppliers, current customers? What is your quality record today with your current suppliers? What is your delivery history with your current customers? And based on those evaluations, you decide Best Buy is who I'm going to use. So that evaluation happens before you source them. Then once you use them, then you use the scorecard to measure their performance. Is the performance as what you thought it would be? And for example, if they say I've got 100% delivery performance with my current customers when I'm looking for a supplier, I like that. Okay, I'll give you the business. And then when 3 months later I look at their history and it says their delivery performance is 90%, let's say 10% of the time they don't deliver on time, you as a purchaser, you as a buyer responsible for that supplier would then go to that supplier and say, you're not meeting your performance goals nor the standards you set for yourself, so what can I do to help you make that job better? And over time we would then fix each of these issues as they come up. Alright, so it is an ongoing, ever-changing pattern. That's why you can't do it on a transaction by transaction basis. It has to be on an aggregate of what I've done this month, this quarter, and then go back and take the bigger items and try and fight those battles and improve them. Okay. All right. So again, this purchasing process is a total process. Right? You should just be familiar with it.
Okay.
I won't ask you in an exam to redo this process. This is not one that you need to memorize. There's another one I want you maybe to memorize, but this one is just convoluted. There's a lot of things happening, and if you read through this at your own leisure and try and understand the yes and no's, ultimately there's 3 or 4 routes through this maze that comes down to making the payment. Ultimately you're still going to make that bill. Let me take you to something that, the key word here is this is a purchase requisition flow. Alright, so this is important to know, because this is a standard process. It's pretty well the same no matter what mainframe system you're using, no matter what purchasing system you're using, it kind of follows this process. Okay, and in all companies, the requester, when someone wants something, they have to make a requisition. The requisition should say what I'm looking for, item I'm looking for, what's its description, how many do I want, and an estimate of what the cost might be. And again, come back to the television, because everyone knows what television is, and you know how expensive it is or not. But if the engineer says, I want a 60-inch TV, and he puts on the value is $500, is what he wants to spend, he has to get that so he fills that detail in. He may come to you as purchaser and say, get me a quote on this, how much does this cost? And you tell him it costs $500, so he'll put that on the requisition. But before I can buy it for him, he has to then take that requisition electronically or physically to his boss, depending on the authorization levels that's been set. It says, you know, Mr. Manager, I want to buy this 60-inch TV for $500. The manager then has to approve that before you as a purchaser can buy it, because you and I do not have budget control. The manager of engineering has budget control. Therefore, the engineer has to get that approval by his department for what he's buying. Now, in many cases, if I give you Algoma as an example, my engineers have a $10,000 limit. That means they can make decisions up to $10,000 without going to the manager. And so they don't have to wait for approval. They can say, it's my budget, I've got $10,000 available at my approval limit. This item is $1,000, so it's no problem, put it through. He approves it, and it comes to you as a requisition that's approved. If it goes over $10,000, automated systems like SCP or Bond or PeopleSoft, automated systems then say, you, Jim Phillips, you have an authorization of $10,000. The item you're buying is $12,000. Therefore, you have to approve it, Jim, and then it's going to automatically go to the next level, and the next level manager will say, Jim is he sees the requisition, he sees that Jim has approved it, he sees it's $12,000, and he will approve or reject it or ask me to explain it. So every time we set authorization levels so that you as an inventory clerk or as a warehouse manager or as a manufacturing manager, you just can't buy anything you want. There's got to be controls in place to meet the budgets. But so they create the rec, they give you the details, you can quote for them, you can give them the number, they'll get their requisition approved, and it comes to you to generate a purchase order. So we create a purchase order, which is the contract between your company and the supplier company. You're contracting with them via the purchase order to say, I want that 60-inch TV. The reason we put it on a purchase order is so the supplier has the legal document that should you fail to pay for it or fail to receive it, then they have a document, they come back and says, you ordered this, this is your purchase order, I delivered it, you received it, but you don't want to pay me for it. So your purchase order is really an individual contract or confirmation that you do want what you've asked for. So verbal orders are bad things. So people call up you as a purchaser and say, call Best Buy and get me a 60-inch TV. You should always say, I can get your quote, I can get your cost, but I'm not getting you a TV until you give me an approved document, because that person may or may not have the budget available. So it's important that you get that approval document. It's important you give that purchase order based on that approved document. In fact, you cannot issue a PO on an electronic system unless you get the approval. It won't let you. Okay? But the supplier then gets it. He fills the need on the PO and he sends it to you. So the order is received, the product is sent to the purchaser or to the company, and you will inspect it most likely and say, this is what I ordered. Therefore, my documents show that it's been received, and then I give it to the person who asked for it. They're happy with it. They'll pay the bill, and everything is good. So there's three things that we do, and it's maybe later on it will show you, but there's a common term that says there is something that's called a three-way match. One is the invoice that comes in from the supplier is matched against the purchase order. So again, your purchase order is for a TV for $1,000. The invoice comes in for a TV at $2,000. That is not a match. We will not pay that invoice because the purchase order, the contract says it's $1,000, but the invoice says it's $2,000. So it will not happen. The other thing is done is it confirms, did you actually receive the goods? Again, and if the supplier has shipped you the goods and you haven't received them yet, but they issue the invoice, theoretically you shouldn't pay for that until you get them, until you know that the goods you've got is correct. But in a lot of cases, once you do your logistics course with Leanne Carver, terms are very important because the FOB point, the freight on board point, determines ownership. So if the FOB is the supplier's store, so when Best Buy ships me that TV, the minute it leaves their dock, it is my property. And if the truck crashes and the TV smashes, it's not Best Buy's problem, it's my problem, because I'm the owner of the part. Now it's going to be the freight company's problem when I go back to them, but essentially FOB declares where does the ownership change hands. If the ownership is my plant, which means Best Buy has to get it from their store to my store or to my house, then they're responsible for everything until it gets there. So you'll get into more detail with that, but it's important as you understand these things, follow this process. Ultimately, you just continue to rotate the process of getting a requisition, getting it approved, making sure the needs are right, ordering, coding, creating that contract with the chosen supplier, receiving the goods, checking the goods, and making sure that that's documented so the system will recognize that. So the 3-way match is it the same? The invoice the same as the PO? Is the PO the same as the invoice? Was it received? And if it's received, then I'm willing to pay for it. So again, if anything, this chart, so make a note that slide 10 is one you should know very well. Okay? Again, I won't ask you to memorize it, but you should be able to easily walk through this process, because it will happen on whether I'm buying a nuclear power plant, whether I'm buying $1,000 TV, or whether I'm buying a box of staples. Theoretically this process will happen, except for the box of staples. We're not going to go through all this shit because it's worth $1.99, $5. We're not going to go through all this process for something of such a low value. We'll put it on a credit card and a procurement card and go from there. Questions at this point? Any questions? Again, if you read your notes, this is going to make sense to you. It will make sense. Okay. When we talk about managing the purchasing process, the first one that always hits you is you must determine your staff levels. How many people will my department need to do my company's job? Everybody, every manager wants more people, whether it's government, whether it's private, or whether it's a incorporated company. Makes no difference. Everybody wants more people, and in my purchasing department, when I first joined Algoma, there was only 5 people. When I left it, you know, in end of June, we had 14 people. So it went from 5 people to 14 people, not just because I asked for it, because the business changed, we implemented different things, we managed a warehouse, we made a consolidation center, we determined logistics, we added jobs to the purchasing function that needs someone to do the job. So they need to do the job, and I have to be able to justify to my CEO, because I reported to the CEO, I'd like to increase my purchasing staff by 2 people because this is what I'm going to do. He will hear, she will hear that story and say, can you justify spending $100,000 in salaries for this job? And I have to be able to justify it. I have to be able to show them that they will get money for the return for the money, and that I'm just not adding bodies for the sake of adding bodies, because my overheads will go up, my cost competitiveness to my customer will diminish. You've got to make sure that as we add people to the purchasing department, even though everybody's very busy doesn't decide that to be, because everyone's busy, and maybe some people are working overtime. You just can't go hire someone else because you need someone else. You've got to justify it. So staffing levels are always the biggest concern that you will have. Okay, and part of this because you have to justify it. Okay, the ability to, the purchasing process says that developing and adhering to budgets. I would think this statement is incorrect from the viewpoint of, not always incorrect, because budgets are not my domain. It belongs to the person who's making the purchasing, engineering, manufacturing, or whatnot. But logistics cost, for example, is my budget. So therefore, I need to develop and try and maintain the logistics cost. In Algoma's case, our logistics cost was, say, $3 million per year. So if I set the budget for, based on last year's volume, $3 million, that will ask for that budget again. My boss, if he's smart, will say, but I gave you $3 million last year, how are you going to improve your process and how much is it now? So if I make a 10% improvement on my process, then I should only be asking for $2.7 million, not $3 million, because I improved it by 10%, which is $300,000. Therefore, I don't need the budget. If I ask for the same budget, even though I've improved the process by 10%, then I haven't given the company anything, because I'll actually spend the budget on something else. So it's important that we find a good cost savings, that you should change your budget accordingly. Okay. Part of my job as a manager is to provide professional training, and on the questions block, which still exists, there was discussions, I think, with Izzy and a couple other people who talked about the value of being certification, whether it be supply chain management professional, whether it be a purchasing manager PMAC or SEMD, or whether it be Apex. Those are all good accreditations. They all help you develop your professionalism. In my company, I expect my purchasers to be certified marine purchasers for Algoma, because we need to understand what the difference between marine is and automotive. It's not the same. So they have to be certified, and if they don't have that certification, I can still hire you, but I know that over the next 5 years you're going to be certified, and so you have to then commit to doing that. Okay. And again, the other thing for managing the process is that we introduce and manage the procure to pay system, which means paying your supplier in a timely basis. Those are things that are important for your business, and if you look after those things, you will have a very efficient department, a very effective department. Now, come back to the staffing levels. For me to go to 5 to 14, we made significant changes, added a lot of value to the organization. But people say to me that I must have the president in my back pocket, because he always approved what I asked for. And part of the reason that I have for that is I know how to justify what I'm asking for, and because that was Honda's requirement, you have to have a very good justification process. And when I do that, and I give you the case of what I need someone else, and here's what the savings will be, and to see what the benefit will be to the company, I know it is well paid for. And then even then, someone can say, no, I just can't afford it. So you can't do what you want to do. Maybe next year you can, but this year you can't. I've got no more budget available. So sometimes it happens. Okay, that's part of your process. The first objective we talked about was supply continuity. Okay, as we want to buy products and services at the right price. Now this slide is what is called the 5 R's. Okay, R. You can see in the slide the right price, purchase from the right source or the right supplier, by the right specification. The correct, right means correct, the correct specification. It means to buy the right quantity, the quantity specified. For example, if I'm buying something of a BMW quality, then I expect to receive something of a BMW quality. Even though purchasing can get it 50% cheaper to the Honda Civic quality, the approved requisition says buy the BMW. Then you should be buying the BMW. It's not purchasing's job to say to someone, no, but I can get it cheaper, so I'm going to buy you a Civic. It's not the case. It doesn't meet the need. And that could be because your new president is going to drive a BMW, therefore he's not driving a Civic. So you cannot, as a purchaser, should not change without authorization, without the requisition's approval, do something cheaper. You can go back to them and say, you asked for $1,000 TV, but actually Walmart's got the same TV on for $500. Can I buy that? Yes. Okay, good. Because he now knows. Okay, as opposed to the $500 TV that Walmart is selling is really not quite the same as the other one, and that's actually what the other one wants. So you have to look at this. But you can see the right quantity at the right time and required for the right internal customer. Those are all things that you have to do. It's important for continuity because supply lines are there for a reason. Even if you're running the Seneca cafeteria, if the muffins don't come The bran muffins don't come tomorrow like they should be and be there at 4 a.m. in the morning before school starts. Then it breaks down and people can't buy them, and you can't feed them, and therefore it's things you need to look for as you do. Supply continuity is your number one requirement. You need to supply the right part, the right price, the right quality, the right quantity, the right time, the right destination, etc., etc. If a supplier can't do all those things for you, then you should be thinking about another supplier. And when I source a supplier, oftentimes the salesman will say, what do you expect of me? And I will take this slide in my head and say, I want every time 100% performance against the right price, which matches what we quote, the right source, the right this, the right that, and make sure everything is correct. And if you do all those things correctly, I will have no problem at all with you as a supplier. And their scorecard will be very good. But I can tell you, delivery and quality are always the two biggest issues, because one would hope you can get 100% delivery performance, and sometimes you can, a lot of times you can, but sometimes you can't, or you don't, and therefore you have to try and address it. Quality is always an issue, because even though I buy 10,000 parts from my car factory, maybe there's 20 of them are bad. I don't want to pay for those 20 bad ones. In fact, I don't want the 20 bad ones in the first place, but sometimes they come to you. So this continuity of supply is something you need to commit to doing, and your job, my evaluation of you as a purchaser, as a buyer, is going to come back to the same things. How often did you deliver your requirements to the person on time? How often did you give your customer, the internal customer, the correct product every time? How often, etc. Was it the right quality? It's your job now, and therefore you need to convey your job to the supplier so that you can do your job properly and you can answer all my questions correctly. They'll say, yes, I did all that, I did that, I did that. Nope, sometimes I failed. And that's okay, because things happen. Shit happens. And then you adjust and you go on. Okay? Alright. Procure-to-pay systems, again, you'll hear that is if you have a procure-to-pay system, a system in place, it can improve your spending visibility. Spending visibility means I know what I bought, I know how much it costs, and I can see that. So when your president comes to you and says, Spencer, what did you spend $1 million last year? You spent $1 million. What did you spend it on? Within probably a day or half a day of a little bit of analysis, Spencer should be able to say to his boss, we spent $1 million on these things here, and give him a list of what he bought by commodity or by grouping or by whatever it is. It says, especially if the $1 million is more than he spent last year, because that's when somebody says, why did you spend so much? So you can show them, and in most cases it's okay, but the visibility helps you recognize I'm spending my budget as I planned, or I'm spending too much of my budget on smaller stuff that's not so important, or I'm building up inventory in my warehouse, therefore I'm spending too much in inventory. What did you spend it on? Okay, and that's where spending visibility is very important, very important. You can also use that spending visibility to convince a supplier that you want to buy from them and they should become your supplier of choice, because I can tell them I spend $10 million on this product line. Therefore, I'd like you to come into that product line, and I'd like you to be one of my preferred suppliers, and that I can anticipate that you'll get 50% of this volume, and therefore you can make about $5 million in sales. So it's important to see that. Okay. The second point says efficient invoicing and payment. It comes back to procure. It means that when we have an invoice, it gets paid promptly, and it's your job. And again, user satisfaction. The user satisfaction is the person who ordered that TV. Is he happy with the result? And if he is, that's great. If not, we should try and fix it. So again, procure to pay is very, very important. I stress it because most companies don't care whether they pay the bill on time. They don't care about the little supplier who's trying to pay his bills. He's already paid his workers. He needs to get paid on a timely basis. Okay. The other one is you need to develop a supply-based management team. So you need to select competitive suppliers. Now, in one of the comments on the board, there was discussions on supplier evaluations. what do you evaluate your suppliers on? And quite honestly, is an acronym called QCDD. QCDD. If I could actually tattoo that on your arm, you should do it, because you always have to make decisions based on QCDD. Okay? Q stands for quality. You're going to buy the quality part that's required. You're going to evaluate your supplier on the quality of the product and quality of the service. You want to look at the C, which is the cost. Is the cost competitive? Are they the best in class supplier, etc., etc.? Is the cost as low as we can get it without hurting the supplier? You have to evaluate them on cost. You have to evaluate them on delivery. Do they deliver on time? What is the delivery performance? Because if you don't deliver, then you have a broken system. Okay. And the second D is so the QCD is quality, cost, delivery. The second D, there's usually a little V beside it for development. Is the supplier capable of developing to a higher level? Some cases you don't care. In a lot of cases you do care, because you want the supplier to continue to get better, and therefore you want to improve them, make them a better supplier. Every company has got A suppliers, B suppliers, and C suppliers. A is a supplier who is capable of design and build, testing, full service supplier. A B supplier is someone who is not as capable as an A supplier. Maybe they don't have an engineering department, maybe they can't test, but they're a pretty good supplier. And a C supplier is just someone who supplies something off the shelf. Okay? The best supplier you can get is an A supplier. The trouble with an A supplier is if you use, they're costly, because they have got engineering, they've got test capabilities, they've got designers, they've got quality technicians, they've got, you know, transportation specialists. Their overheads are much higher because they're bigger companies, and they're very capable. And if I need someone to do a very capable supplier to do a very capable job, then I should use an A supplier. But to buy a box of photocopy paper, I shouldn't use an A supplier, I should use a C supplier. Just send it to me. Don't spend so much money on it. Okay? And we'll get into more of that, but realize that there's different levels of suppliers inside your system. There's reasons you'd use good suppliers and reasons that you shouldn't use a good supplier. And primarily it drives down to Q, C, D, D. I will ask you on your midterm, explain the concept of Q, C, D, D. I will ask you, because all your decisions are based on that from now on, not just cost. If you're going to evaluate your product just based on cost, then you're clearly standing solidly in a traditional side. I don't care about quality, I don't care about delivery, I don't care about your development capability. I just worry about my cost. That's very short-sighted, and it will hurt you and hurt your company down the line. So write them down again. I know I can't see you, but write down the letters Q, C, D, D with a small V beside it. It is important when you select a supplier to use that criteria. It is important when you evaluate them on your scorecard that you evaluate in the same way based on Q, C, D, D. And if you do that, you'll have less trouble in your future. Now, in chapter 7 or after your midterms, we'll talk about creating that supplier evaluation form, that the system for checking them. As you need to define what those things mean, all right? And you need to define what it is, because when I quote a supplier and I am looking for, and I evaluate that quote based on QCDD, supplier A could have the lowest cost, but if they've got the worst performance on hit delivery, it may not make it the lower cost, because it's going to cost me more money to find the parts to continually have stoppages in my process. So even though that if you can't meet my requirements on all the QCDD requirements, some suppliers with better quality, then they get higher rated there, but they're higher cost, they get lower rated in cost, because at the end of the day, you're supposed to buy products and services that meets the needs of the organization from multiple viewpoints, and not just cost. Please get the idea that cost is most important out of your head. It is important, but no more important than quality, and no more important than delivery, and no more important than development if you need a development supplier. They are in Honda's eyes, in Toyota's eyes, they're of equal value to the organization. Now, I can change that and say that for a C-class supplier, cost is most important. And so therefore I can set that the cost is worth 50% of the value, and quality and delivery are 25% each. You can do that. But it's important you know that from the different viewpoints, the quality looks at the product different from you do. You're looking at it from a cost, and the person who is looking at the warehouse guy is looking at it from delivery. So it's important to have that round 360-degree look at products from a QCDD basis. And I already mentioned now 17 times, when I ask you what QCDD is, you should have an idea right away. Spit it out: quality, cost, delivery, and development. It's very important. Questions? Any question? Oh, okay, good question. No, there's a question. So the question is, sir, where is QCDD on the slide? And it's not on the slide. It's Jim Phillips' experience that says QCDD is far more important. And you will notice that in the text will come under the terms quality. Most likely.
I have a question.
Hold on. The question is on the table is, where is it on the slides? It's not on the slides. That's why you have to make a note of it. It is very important that you get QCDD into your head, even though the author here does not consider it that important until later on down in the course. Okay, next question.
So I was asking, is it important to look for all the QCDD aspects in one supplier, or like it can be different suppliers with different aspects?
Again, it depends on what you are looking for. You're looking for all those aspects in a supplier, and let's just assume they're all complex things you're buying. You're buying complex things. You're looking for them in all suppliers. If a supplier doesn't have, say, development capability, and you need a development capability, then you should not be looking for that supplier. And so the idea in using the QCDD is that you determine up front what level of supplier do I need, an A supplier, a B supplier, a C supplier. And don't ask a C supplier to quote A supplier business, because they don't have the capability. They are a make to print, send my stuff off my shelf to you, and that's what it is. Okay, so it is important that you know as a buyer what's your criteria. Not all suppliers have all 4 criteria. Not all suppliers.
So it depends on what we are looking for.
It depends what you're buying and depends what you're doing. And that's why I don't want to use an A supplier that's development capability, engineering and test capability, to buy something that's I don't need it for. If I'm buying something off the shelf, just buy it off the shelf. Okay? Alright, so that's the type of thing that you should think about, is that it's not always necessary everything is QCDD, but in your mind that's where you should always start from and ask the question, what supplier do I need? What level do I need? Okay? Very important, because you can spend, and really I can tell you now, A, B, C supplier, if I was to give them the same price, here's a quote that I want you to do, most likely the variation will be significant from A to B to C. First of all, C wouldn't know really how to quote it. He'll come up with a ballpark figure. He'll go out and he'll find an A supplier. He'll buy it from the A supplier and give it to you and mark it up accordingly. So always think about, that's a very important criteria. It's not emphasized in this course by the author, but in my life as a purchasing chief, it's very, very important, and that's why you should be listening to what I say, because I have more experience than the author who's an academic here. Alright? So remember, QCDD is very, very important. And I'll try, and what I'll do is I'll send a summary of QCDD to you. I'll make it up and I'll send you so you know you have the information. But it will come up on your midterm, it will come up on your final, absolutely for sure. Okay? So it's very important we know that. Okay, back to the slides. Okay, now time wise we're at 11:52, so we're going to get through some more. Now we're going to stop about 12:15, and then we'll continue on next week with the rest of it. But again, if you look at your purchasing process again, okay, if you look at this, your purchasing process, that's just a repeat of the slide that was previously, but except in this case that we've now got the evaluation process circled in red, and that's what we're talking about. If you go back and say, is it an approved supplier? No. Is it an amount small? No. Is it a complex requirement? Yes. Do I need an FRI and an RFQ? FRI is request for information. Do I need more information from a supplier? Therefore, I'm asking for information. Don't give me a price, just give me information about what I might use. And maybe I'm looking for something to do a specific job that I don't know what I want to buy. So I'm asking for an RFI from my suppliers who are capable of doing what we think they're capable of doing that job. Tell me what I need to know. And then based on that, I'll go back to the requisitioner, to the engineer, to the accountant, to the manufacturing guy and say, this is information we see from the supplier, this is what they're suggesting you need. You don't need a 10 kilowatt generator, you only need a 3 kilowatt generator, so buy a 3, not a 10. But as soon as you go to an RFI and RFQ, if the supplier doesn't exist, then you need to find them. So evaluate your suppliers. Even if you have them in your house, you may have 3 suppliers capable, so evaluate your suppliers in giving that complex product based on QCDD. Okay? Then once you select the supplier, so supplier ABC, and then you do an evaluation, and I will give you actually a Honda form. I'll send you a Honda form, and I don't know exactly where it is on my PC. I will just pull it up for you. I should have had it pulled up for you ahead of time, but I will send you a Honda form. It's all on one page. It shows how they evaluate a supplier based on QCDD for the purpose of sourcing business. Okay, because again, good companies do not have monopolies. They do not give all of the business to one supplier. At Honda, we have probably a bank of 3 to 5 suppliers who are all capable of building something. And then, based on my strategy, they will get so much of the business. And then, in this process, again, we bid, you look at the negotiation, and then you make your supplier selection. I almost disagree with that from 2 to 3A to 3B. I almost disagree with that because you cannot negotiate with 5 suppliers. It's very difficult. What you have to do based on QCDD is come to who is the most likely supplier based on your QCDD analysis, and then I'm going to negotiate with that supplier to get my cost where I want it to be. To have 4 or 5 negotiations with 5 different suppliers, very taxing, very, very difficult. And they all get pissed off. The 4 who don't get the job, don't get the business, will be pissed off they spent a long time negotiating with you. So when you're evaluating suppliers, it's important there. You know at that point who you want to do this job. Now, once I've got that identified, supplier B is the one I prefer. I'm going to go to supplier B and I'm going to negotiate my cost at that point. Because now I've just taken my job from 5 negotiations down to 1 negotiation. Okay. Then you see what happens is once you do that, then you issue the PO and you go through the process again. Everything goes fine. So you get purchase approval, still gets approved, goes through the PO, and then we go there. Now you'll see the supplier scorecard is updated down below. You'll see that item number 6 will get there, but again, not every transaction. Okay, so this again, this is where you see this RFI or RFQ. The RFI is request for information. It's not a quote, it's not a commitment. An RFQ is here's what I think the cost of this product is. Okay, or cost to build your building, or the cost to pave your parking lot. That's what that is. And then you still go through the requisition process, the approval process. It still happens. It's sometimes you take that detour. Okay. Develop strong internal relationships. I'd like to say that if you're going to be successful, if you're going to climb up the ladder from a junior buyer to a buyer to a senior man to a senior buyer to a assistant manager to a manager to a director to a VP, the higher up you go in an organization, the stronger your internal relationships need to be. I need to feel comfortable as a purchasing director sitting down with a financial director to talk about my issues and my problems, because he might be one of my problems, because he wants to pay the supplier in 75, 100 days or 60 days. That would have a big impact on me, and I would have to sit with that director of purchasing, director of finance to say, I need your help here because this is what you're doing to our supply system. This is what you're doing to my supply chain. So I'd like you to justify for me, if you can, the savings you'll get from paying 60 days, 2%, 1%, 0.5%, because remember the percentage is usually 3% a year. How can you help me do the job done? And in some cases, I need to help him because he will come to me and say, your suppliers are not giving me accurate invoices. Can you help me fix that? Of course I can. So it's always a two-way street. I can help them, they can help me. And if my relationships are strong, then they are more likely to work with me, not do what I ask, more likely to work with me in a collective professional level, as opposed to the guy saying, no, I don't have time for this shit, not doing it, Jim, get out of my office, I don't want to talk about this. My strength at Algoma and my strength at Honda was building strong communication between the other stakeholders. This means understanding what they do. You know, even though you're not an accountant, you should understand accounting principles so that when the accountant says, this is why I can't do something, that you're intelligent enough to understand what he's saying. So it's important to build that internal relationship. Strong two-way communication. Don't tell people what to do. Ask them to help you, with them to come to a common solution, and you fix the problem. Okay. Your third point here is cross-functional team, and this is going to be a well-used term before you finish OPM600, and definitely before you finish OPM620. Cross-functional coordination and collaboration is one of the strengths of a company. If everybody works inside the silo, accounting only stays in accounting, and engineering only stays in engineering, manufacturing only stays in manufacturing, I can guarantee you the profitability will not be as good as it could be when you develop a strong cross-functional coordination and collaboration. Everybody's in this together. My job's to help the accountant, my job's to help the purchaser, my job's to help the manufacturing person. I need to be willing to do that because, again, QCDD gives you 4 viewpoints of a supplier. QCDD to the manufacturing gives them 4 viewpoints to the supplier, but he is more concerned with maybe delivery, or he's more concerned with the quality. The price is already done. The manufacturing guy doesn't care about pricing or cost. That's not his job. His job is to get the product in my door and make it into something else. He doesn't have to tell me you're paying too much for that. It's none of his business, quite honestly. His job is to make the part. My job is to get the best part for the best price that I can. So again, everybody looks at QCDD from their strength. Mine is cost. The manufacturing guy is going to be quality, maybe, or delivery. The engineer is going to look at it from a development. The supplier could have terrible manufacturing history, terrible delivery history, but the engineer wants them because he's a very good supplier for development. No, you can't do that. Okay, so you have to be careful. All right. Positive problem-solving relationships. To go into another director's office, a manager's office, or an engineer and say to them, you know, I got a problem with you. I got a problem how you're doing this, and you need to fix your problem. That's a very combative situation, and that doesn't solve anything. What you need to do in your problem solving is be positive. That says, here's my situation. This is the impact this had. Can you help me resolve some of these issues? Because I think you're part of the problem. And he may be able to, that engineer may tell me, yeah, I can see what you're saying, and I can help you. Or maybe, no, I'm actually doing, you need to talk to somebody else. But it's important you stay positive. Having a combative relationship with your internal or your suppliers is not a good thing. It is not a good thing. You want to stay positive. You want to reflect on that positiveness and try to be it. It doesn't mean you bow to them. It doesn't mean you give in to them. It means you stay positive and you look at the right way to do something based on doing things because it's right, as opposed to I'm going to force you to do something you don't want to do. So this slide I think is very important because in your career development, these things are required as you climb the ladder. Okay. You need to support we're on slide 17. You need to support the goals and objectives of the organization. Again, everybody has to do that. The big word there is congruency of functional goals and organizational goals. If my president says one of our targets to reduce our overall cost by 10% this year because I'm going to lose money, then I need to find a way to save 10% of what I'm buying. because that's what the company goal is, then therefore purchasing goal has to be the same thing. 10% of the purchases, we have to find a way to say it. And my purchasers can tell me, we can't do that, we can't do that. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to try and do it because that is the direction my president has told us. Okay? If the president says that, you know, this year we have had a lot of customer complaints about the poor quality of our product, therefore we're going to improve the quality. He's going to improve his quality at sometimes at a cost impact. But maybe quality is very important, so therefore we're going to try and fix the quality. And he may be willing to pay more money for that. But he's trying to improve the quality goal.
Sir.
Yep.
Somebody's mic is on and we keep losing audio.
Okay, can someone just double check your, in fact, I can help that problem here, I think. So many noise, hold on, okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, you're all on mute in my control now. So unless you can unmute yourself, whoever's making the noise, you know you can hear it yourself. If you can mute yourself, that's great. I don't necessarily want to mute you, but let's try. Make sure everybody is muted. If you want to say something, just as Saman just said, as opened his mic and spoke, that's right. And keep in mind, guys, when I'm looking at the slides, I can't look at your indicator, so just don't be afraid to shout out. So thanks for that. It's quiet now, which is good. Let's go from there. Okay. This support your goals. This slide actually is probably more applicable to OPM600 as we go into strategy and whatnot. But again, you must have collaboration. You must be willing to meet the company's goals, and some cases, you know, if one of the functional departments, manufacturing, quality, you know, sales and marketing, you know, they don't agree with what the president's doing, the issue is not with me. The issue is with them. Go talk to the president. But we need to make sure we are meeting the corporate goals. And if somebody comes to you and tries to avoid that goal, if the president says quality is your #1 objective this year, and someone says I don't give a shit about quality, or just I want the cheapest price, you as a purchaser have to say, and I as a purchasing director would say, no, that is not what the company is asking for. The company's direction is we want to improve our quality. This will not improve our quality, therefore we're going to talk about it because I'm not prepared to do it just because you said so. So it's important to know that. Okay, understand that you have to be mutually supportive. If accounting's got a goal, and as long as that goal is meeting the company's goals, then you have to find a way to help support that goal. Okay. And if one is to improve, the goal is to improve your accounting efficiency, then he's going to come and say the suppliers are sending bad invoices, not sending invoices time, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. Can you help? Yes, you have to find a way to help them. Okay. Understand the third point. Purchasing has got a substantial impact on an organization's bottom line. We've talked about this in the first chapter. We'll talk about it in the second. We'll talk about it in the fourth. We'll talk about it in the 10th chapter. You drive a significant impact on the bottom line of a company. To the tune of 50% of your total sales is purchased outside. 60% can be purchased outside. 80% in Honda's case is purchased outside. Anything you do to improve that percentage, meaning even though you're buying 80% of the product, the total sales, you're buying 80% of that, your job is to make that the most efficient you can. That's why purchasing is now get a high priority. It's why we have what we call chief procurement officers. It's why purchasing, in my case, reports to the company president, because he knows the impact I've got on his bottom line. And when the new president came 2 years ago, him and I had some complex discussions, but I was able to commit to him as I think you can save $2 million a year. And he says to me, if you can save $2 million a year, Jim, in your department, I'll be very happy, because that is $2 million of profit in our company. He supported me because that first year we didn't save $2 million, we saved $6 million. So his corporate goals were met, and then some. He was able to look very good to his board of directors because he was much more profitable than he thought he would be. And then we looked good as a company and as a department because we exceeded his goal. The trouble is when we saved 6 million that year, the next year he came back and he wanted another 2 million, but he says, you got 6 last year, can you get 6 again? Sometimes they tend to be a little bit greedy, and that's a challenge. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Okay, but you do have a huge impact on the bottom line, and that bottom line is just not cost. It's about improving the quality, improving delivery, because all those poor things, poor performances, take away profit. So if you help improve delivery, you're actually going to keep your manufacturing. You're going to help a common goal of improving your manufacturing because you're going to make sure the product's there on time. Okay, so it's important that you know you have an impact. You're not the only one. Everybody's got the job to do and got something to do, but you have a special job to do because I think there's a huge benefit there. Okay, and make sure purchasing has got a strategic core competency, meaning we're no longer in the back room. We're no longer just pushing POs like a traditional model would. You are now strategic in the sense that you have conversations with your C-suite. The C-suite is called the chief suite, which is your chief operating officer, your chief financial officer, your chief quality officer, your chief procurement officer, and those 3 or 4 jobs are what are called the executive committees. You have a big impact on them. You want to make sure that purchasing, if you can be strategic. And I guess you can't do this as you start your career, but you need to be knowing that as you're taking a job, this is maybe a question you ask as you interview for a job, is purchasing considered a strategic partner in your business? And they'll tell you honestly, no, yes, sometimes it's getting better. Because you want to know going into a company, what type of company am I going into? Am I joining? Okay, and you may be okay with that job, even if it's not exactly the ideal job you want initially. It's experience. So don't think it's mandatory to be contemporary based or strategic based. A lot of purchasing departments are not strategic yet, but that is your benefit because they have to come that way eventually, and you should be skilled enough to take them there, which means that you have got a better chance of success than the students 5 years ago when strategy wasn't part of the core. All right? Okay. Just hold a second. Market intelligence. Market intelligence is very difficult, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's nice to have connections in the marketplace. One of your best places is going to be for market intelligence is your suppliers. Your suppliers are also supplying your competition most likely. If I have a strong relationship with my supplier, he will actually feed me indirectly sometimes some information about what is happening. CSL is my biggest competitor with Algoma. And CSL is a very difficult organization to deal with, and so because Algoma is a good organization to deal with and we've made it a very professional environment for the suppliers to work with them, it's amazing how much market intelligence they give us. Like I knew, for example, that my competitor has now just lost a main engine on a boat that's going to delay that boat for four months before it hit the news. The reason being it's important for me is because my marketing people may want to go to that supplier or that customer to see if they can pick up that business. Can I help you? Because I just heard this, right? So it's important that you have a trustworthy system, a trustworthy approach to your suppliers and to your marketplace, then you get good information. And market intelligence is important. And I'm going to tell you how, if I use a product line for you, and you know, for example, 10 years ago, maybe even 8 years, 6 years ago, navigation systems or GPS in a car used to go into all high-end cars, and then it's sprinkled down to the lower-end cars. And a Navi system or a GPS system for a car in dash would be about $1,500. So the market intelligence, if I knew before smartphones became really smart, the smartphone was going to actually have GPS on every cell phone, why would I want to get into the market of buying a GPS factory or making GPS in-dash systems when it costs $1,500 to put it in a car, and yet you can buy a phone and it's on there for nothing. It's free, other than your data. That change in market intelligence, you have to be able to foresee that, because the last thing you want to do is to invest millions of dollars to be able to build in-dash navigation systems when 10 years later they're gone. They're still in cars, but now it's a much less costly bit, because now they're all over the place, and you don't have to buy it in car because you can just get it on your phone, which will actually go in car anyway because it'll come through your touch screen, and you don't have to pay $1,500 for it. So market intelligence is important. The flip phone, the old phones that that not so long ago were best in class, now they're so out of date with the new technologies that had you put money into that, you'd be now losing money. And some of those companies are no longer in business because they did not respond to the market quick enough, and that's based on the intelligence that you pick up. Okay. Reasons for not being strategic. There really is no reason for not being strategic. It means it says the purchasing personnel have not participated in senior level purchasing. That is completely a true statement, and it completely comes from the traditional side of the world, whereby price is everything, cost is everything. You have to, if purchasing is not strategic, they're not having senior level discussion, they're not in senior level planning, then you're in an old style company that your job won't be so exciting. And most likely, if you go into a company like that, you're only going to be there for 3 or 4 years, get some experience, and get the hell out of there. Okay. Effective executive management does not recognize the benefits. That's an old statement. Any executive who does not understand today how strategic purchasing is should not be an executive, should not be a CEO. And most likely it's somebody who owns a company and he knows better than anybody else, and he is the sole decision maker in the company. It's not a good thing. There's no reason for not being strategic, even for someone who doesn't want to be strategic. Strategic just means you have to think deeply about what you're doing, make the plan, the objectives, set the objectives, and do it. If you're not doing that, you're really not a well-managed company. Okay, I'm going to stop there at this point. It's 12:15. We'll talk about the purchasing responsibilities and that going forward next week. We'll pick it up. And by the way, keep in mind that next week's lecture, 26 of Thursday 26 is the Albino class, Albino lecture. We're going to have that lecture on Tuesday at 9 a.m. And again, if this recording is successful, it'll be available for you online. If it's not, then I will hold a second same lecture on the Saturday if I can't record it properly, if it doesn't come across well. So next week you'll plan to be in the Tuesday lecture if you can, and if not, then I'll do a Saturday lecture also if I can't record it. But that's important because the 26 trip to Amazon is very important for you. It's important to see from a logistics point of view, from an operations point of view, from an inventory control, from a purchasing point of view. I think you're going to see a very good plant tour. And I think after you see that, you'll understand why all of these departments have to be collaborating together. And remember, this Amazon Fulfillment Center is just a distribution center. It's a consolidation and distribution center. And one will say, well, what's that got to do with purchasing? Right time, right delivery at the right place is very important. Okay, it's one of your QCDDs. D is delivery. A fulfillment center is playing an intricate part in the delivery of products to Amazon on a timely basis. It is very important in your QCDD evaluation. Okay? So that's next week. And I will issue a separate meeting notice for the Tuesday lecture. Again, that's what you have to be careful and watch for. Any questions? Okay, hold on.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, uh, so do we have a discussion for this week?
Yeah, you will. I'm going to finish the discussion board that you're on now, and give that back to you. I will look for another discussion board to have, based on what we've studied so far in the lecture. So I'd like a discussion board every week. I don't think it takes a lot of time to do a discussion board, but I also don't want to overload you either. So what I'm thinking is probably one discussion board per chapter. That's what I'm thinking. So maybe there'll be no discussion board this week, and we'll finish the chapter material, and then you can do a discussion board next week. I'm thinking that might be better. Okay, so one discussion board per chapter. So essentially, we'll have 3 discussion boards before your midterm, and 2 discussion boards afterwards. Okay, so you don't need one every week. I think it'll be too much to do for you. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Okay, all right. Hopefully, we'll
Just
get
a
better at
follow-up
this.
question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Are the slides you're showing us right now going to be updated on Blackboard?
Nope, because it's a published slide from the manufacturer. So the slide we're talking about now, or what slide?
Oh, it's just the whole PowerPoint. Just because I noticed that you have a more updated PowerPoint than the one that's on Blackboard.
Oh, then I will definitely change it. Thank you very much for that.
No, I don't think that is changed. It just changed the slide number only.
Sorry, say that again.
I think the slides are just in a different order.
No, I think this.
No, we have 48. He has 65.
Yes, I will put the new one out there. Thank you very much for noting that. I probably picked up the one that was directly taken from the author. I'll go back and I do have one. This is a revised one, so I've made some revisions here. So what I'll do, I will post them today for you. I'll pull the other one down and post this, so you'll have a full set of 65 slides today. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for noting that. Those are good things that I sometimes forget that I have different levels here. I will get that done and we'll talk about it. Hopefully you get some benefit out of this. If you've got a question related to the lecture, again, use the blog questions for that, because again, everyone will get the same answer. And we've got 4 questions out there that's been answered now. Don't be afraid to keep using that in the interim, because I think it's important that as you read through the blogs or check the blogs to see if there's any changes to them. But anything related to a lecture, put in there. If it's something personal or something that you don't want to be shared, then definitely come back to me directly. The other thing I talked about some people when we did their check is I'll create a virtual office, and I posted a notice board saying that a virtual office that I'll be available from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock every morning, and I will try to be available every day in my office for that. So if you want to come and knock on my office door, which of course at Seneca you could do that, but here you can't, just send me an email saying can I talk to you tomorrow and we'll just set up a video conference. Okay. Alright, I want to make sure I'm accessible to you just as I would be if we were at school, but I think doing a virtual online office is much better, because actually we can do it anytime. But I'd like to try and bring it down to just 1 hour a day, so that my normal life is not so impacted. The checking of all of your connectivities was a chore, but it's fine now. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for joining me. What I'll try and send you a little survey out, maybe, just to see how effective it is, and because my concept of continuous improvement should be, I need to continue to improve what I'm doing here as your instructor, as your professor. This is the first time we've done this, so there should be many suggestions how we do it different. I welcome those suggestions. I'll actually look at them all, and I don't want you, when I ask for your opinion, I don't want you ever to think I can't say that because I'll fail you. That's never the case. It's not the case. I want us all to always to be respectful to each other and make positive suggestions that how we might improve things. If we do that, then we'll be able to create over this next, 5 or 6 weeks or 8 weeks that we've got left in our course. It will probably help us become me a better professor, you a better student. We'll be able to develop a system that helps tremendously, and we'll become, to use the term we learned today, a world-class online class for us. I don't know what world-class is yet, but we'll have to find that out. Okay, I'll ask your opinion. Don't be afraid to tell me honestly, because I've got thick skin, and if we're not doing something right, the only thing I can't improve for you is I can't improve my accent. After 52 years in Canada, it's not changing. I need to slow down somewhat, I know, but it's very difficult for me to do that. But please, I'll ask for your opinion. Be honest.
Your accent's fine.
All right. Okay. All right. I appreciate that, but I know it's not. But anyway, I do appreciate you're all online. Most of the students were here. We had 18 participants, which is 17 students. So 5 did not do this. That's their loss. But I will post it, and they can go through the conversation if they want. Okay. I'll try and post it and see what happens. Again, to all who came in on the connectivity checks, thank you. You did your homework ahead of time. We didn't have any issues recording or issues today, so at least not that I'm aware of. So that's been good news. I'll see you all either in the virtual office. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to keep things going. And again, we won't have another discussion board this week. We'll have one next week. Okay? Have a good day. And thank you very much for allowing me to be online, because I don't have to drive 6 hours back and forth, and I very much appreciate that. Okay? Have a good day, and we'll talk later. Thank you.